Hello everyone and welcome to another devlog video for Homegrown, the casual farming game I'm making using my own engine. And this week I'm going to be trying to work out what the point of having paths in your farm is. So there are two main questions that I want to answer about the pathways this week. Firstly, why would the player not just make one giant bed to fill up their whole farm, because at the moment that's the most efficient way of using your land and there's no reason why you wouldn't. And then secondly, what is the point of the different path types? What do the different path types do? So I've got a lot of different potential ideas about the paths, but I'm very unsure about all of them. So this week's going to be all about just trying stuff out in the game, seeing what feels right, seeing what doesn't work, and then after I've been able to try them out in the game and after hearing your feedback, I'll work on this more in the future and hopefully we'll at some point end up with some good reasons for having paths in the game. So if any of you have any feedback on anything you see in this video, or you have other ideas about what the paths could be used for, then please do let me know. But for now, I'm going to get started with some programming. Before I can actually start implementing the features this week, there's quite a lot of setup programming that I need to do, because at the moment in the game it has no concept of vegetable beds or pathways. It knows individual tiles, so it knows that this tile is a soil tile, it knows that this tile is a path tile, but it doesn't know that this whole thing is one bed and that this is a separate bed and that the path is connecting them together. It doesn't have any concept of that. So I've just been starting off by doing a bit of graph theory to implement these concepts into the game. To start with, I've been implementing the concept of vegetable beds into the game. So the game now knows about vegetable beds, it knows how many tiles are in each one, it can distinguish between separate beds, and it updates when you edit the terrain, so it knows when two beds get merged together to form a bigger bed, and it also can detect when a bed gets split into two separate beds. So this is just going to keep track of which soil tiles are in which vegetable beds. And I was actually able to use quite a lot of code from the city builder to do this. I was doing a similar thing there where I was trying to work out continuous connected blocks of road in the road network, and here I'm obviously doing the same thing but with soil tiles, working out continuous connected blocks of soil tiles. The next thing I've been working on is getting the game to know whether a bed is completely surrounded by a path or not. So I'm testing that here. You can see the bed changes colour to indicate whether it's completely surrounded, and that all seems to be working nicely. I've been doing a lot of work in the code to create a kind of network of all of the soil tiles and the path tiles. So behind the scenes, everything's represented in this network, and then when you update the terrain, it just updates the relevant local part, so it doesn't have to recalculate everything every time you edit the terrain. And then having this network makes it pretty trivial to work out things like whether a bed's surrounded or not. Just finished implementing the final thing that I need to be able to test about the paths and the beds, and that is whether the beds are connected to a specific object via the pathways. So here I'm just testing it with this obelisk object that I've just made, and you can see that the beds now change colour to indicate whether they're connected to that object via a pathway. And it's able to do this quite efficiently thanks to the whole network that's set up behind the scenes. So when you make a change to the path system, it doesn't have to recalculate for every bed. It just updates the relevant part of the network and updates only the relevant beds. So now that all the setup's done, I can finally get started and implement some of the features for making the paths useful. And first up, I want to try to come up with a feature that will make it beneficial to have smaller beds. And my first thought for this was that maybe your tools could work slower the further away they are from the edge of the bed. So, for example, in a bed like this, when you're working around the edge, your tools would work at full speed, but then as you move away from the edge into the center of the bed, your tool would get slower and slower making you want to split it up into smaller beds. But I feel like that's a bit negative. It's kind of punishing the player. I think when the player first comes across that, it will just be a bit annoying. And it's also very direct. It's very clearly the developer just trying to stop you from having big beds. So I'd like to come up with something more indirect and something that benefits you if you have smaller beds. There is actually something kind of like that already in the game. In the weed system, your bed can get infected by this aggressive species of weed, and then that weed will spread quite quickly over the entire bed, but it won't spread outside of the bed. So that would be one reason why you might want to keep your bed size a bit smaller to help contain outbreaks. So that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for, and I've got an idea. It's interesting. I want to try it out and see how it feels in the game, so that's what I'm going to do first. While I've been working on this feature, I realised that it would be quite useful if I could see some information about each tile, so I've just quickly added this option here, which allows me to inspect a terrain tile and see information about it. There will actually be a UI like this in the game. It will hopefully look a lot nicer than this, but you know the drill by now. The big UI overhaul is coming up very soon, so I'm not going to be spending any time making the UI look nice at this stage. And it really is going to be soon. I've only got one more update until I do that UI overhaul, so it might even be in the next Devlog video. So I've just finished implementing this little idea that I wanted to try, and the way that it works is that when you're working in a bed, doing some watering for example, if you do that action for the entire bed in one go, so for all of the tiles without stopping or doing any other action in between, then when you complete the bed, you get a little combo bonus. And this bonus improves the effectiveness of the action that you just did. So if you get the compost bonus, for example, then that compost that you just placed will last longer than usual. Or the seed bonus makes those seeds germinate a bit faster. Or the watering bonus causes the tiles to stay wetter for a bit longer. But it's only for that last watering. It resets every time that you do the action. So this makes you think a bit more about your bed sizes, because if you want to get the bonus, then smaller beds are generally going to make that easier. But more importantly, some tools like the watering can or the compost bucket have a capacity and will need refilling. So if your bed's too big, you can't do it all in one go and you won't get that bonus. And also if you have one big bed with many different crop types, then all of the crop types have different requirements and need watering at different times. So if you're only watering some of them, then again, you won't get the bonus. So you might want to consider splitting it up into smaller beds so that you can get those bonuses, which ultimately would reduce your workload. So I quite like this idea. It's a purely positive buff. The player isn't forced to do anything. You're not being punished for making bigger beds. You still can if you want, but there is now a benefit to keeping your bed sizes smaller. The downside though is that it's not in any way based on reality, so it might not be that intuitive at first. Maybe with some improved visual feedback and UI changes, I could make it feel a bit more intuitive, but I don't know. I'm going to keep it in the game for now. I'll keep playing around with it, and then the next time I work on the paths, I'll see how I feel about it then. The next idea I've just been trying out is to do with the actual pathways, and it is that connecting your beds with specific objects will give some sort of benefit to the bed. Exactly what those benefits are and what the objects are, I haven't quite decided, but for now, any beds that are connected via a pathway to the house get a speed boost for your tools, so your tools work faster in those beds. And I like this idea. I know I haven't got the details figured out yet, but I like the connecting concept because it means you start using pathways kind of like how you would in real life to connect up different parts of your farm. So I've just been building on that previous feature and coming up with some reason for having the different path types. So the object determines the type of buff that you get. So in this case, the house determines that you'll get a speed boost if you connect with it. And then the path type that you use to connect to the house determines the strength of the buff. So I've set up a little example here. This bed, not connected to the house at all, so obviously it doesn't have the buff at all. This bed is connected to the house, but the path type, it also takes into account the path surrounding the bed, which in this case is just grass. So it has the buff, but it's only the tier 1 version of the buff. Then this bed here is connected and surrounded by dirt path, so it has the tier 2 version of the buff. And this bed over here is completely surrounded and connected by the tile path, which is the most expensive and the highest tier path in the game at the moment. And so this gets the tier 3 buff. So when I'm using my tools in this bed, it's going to be a lot faster than when I harvest in this bed. Speaking of harvesting, there's a lot of vegetables on my balcony that are ready to be harvested, so I'm going to do that now and then have some of them for dinner, and then I think I'm done for the day, so I'll see you tomorrow morning. Today I'm going to be working on the final idea that I want to try for the paths, which is going to be a bit of a downside of having a path, because at the moment everything I've implemented has just been beneficial, so it's nice to balance things out with them having a bit of a downside as well, and that is that over time the paths are going to get dirty, and different path types will get dirty at different rates, and then as they get dirtier, the benefits that they provide will be diminished until you clean them. I thought I'd start off by implementing some placeholder visuals for the dirt, just so that I can see what I'm doing while I'm working on the functionality. So I set up a quick instanced renderer, which can render these textured quads to show bits of dirt on the terrain. Next up, I've just been implementing the dirty component, which is what all of the path tiles are going to have. This has a value between 0 and 1, which indicates how dirty that tile is. And then when that value changes, the visuals get updated accordingly. So in the game, I'm just going to manually increase that dirtiness value for all the path tiles, and you can see that the placeholder visuals here have changed to reflect that, and I can also decrease that value to clean the tiles again. I've just been making the item that you're going to use to clean the paths, which is this broom here, and you can buy that from the tool shop, which I'll do here. You can also upgrade the broom, like you can upgrade most of the tools to make it clean a bigger area or clean more efficiently. And then back in the farm, I can equip the broom, and then I will be able to use that to clean the paths. I haven't actually implemented the cleaning mechanic yet. That's what I'm going to be doing next. So the cleaning functionality is working, so I can use the broom now to clean up this dirty pathway, and it feels pretty satisfying. I feel like it would be even more satisfying though if it actually looked good. The visuals are a bit of an issue. I've been trying a bit to make them look better, but it's quite hard. It's quite hard to get the dirt to fit in with the rest of the art style, because the art style in the game is very simple and clean and doesn't have any texture. So then adding this quite noisy texture to the pathways just doesn't really fit in that well. So I'll have to do a lot more work on this. If anyone has any ideas of how I could make the dirt look nicer or fit in better, then please let me know. Just been working on how the paths get dirty in the first place. So now when you're working in a bed, it increases the dirtiness value of the surrounding path tiles. So you can see when I'm doing the weeding here, it's making the nearby paths dirtier, although it won't actually happen this fast. This is just for the demonstration. And as I said earlier, the dirtier the path gets, the less well it transmits the buffs. So for example, that speed boost from the house, it would normally be a tier 3 buff for this bed because of the tile path, but because the path is so dirty, that's been reduced to just the tier 1 version of the buff, and it will stay like that until you clean the path again. So almost done now. There's just one more thing that I want to implement this week, but I'll do that after dinner. So last up, I've just made it possible for the different path types to get dirty at different rates. So for example, here you can see I'm doing the same action in both of these beds, but the dirt path in this example is getting dirtier. I know that doesn't really make sense, it's already a dirt path, but it's getting dirtier at a faster rate than the tile path. And I think this could introduce some interesting decisions for the player. For example, you might have one bed full of high maintenance crops, so you need to do a lot of work in that bed, which means that the surrounding path is going to get dirty a lot. And so in that situation, you might think it's worth investing in the higher quality path that doesn't get dirty as much, to save you some time on cleaning. But then for your more low maintenance beds, you might decide it's not worth investing in the easy clean pathways because they're not going to get that dirty anyway. So I quite like that because it means you'll be using different path types in different situations. So that's going to be it for this week. Sorry it was a bit higgledy-piggledy this time, a lot of kind of half-baked ideas, but that's what this week was all about, just prototyping, trying stuff out, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, and I think there were some ideas in there that I'll be able to build on in the future. Obviously all of the details still need sorting out, and the visuals just need completely reworking, especially the UI, but as I said, that's coming up very soon. But yeah, it was just the first iteration, so I think it's been productive. Before I finish, I want to give a big thank you to the top Patreon supporters from last month, who were Shadeless Fox, Koza, SuperVR, Sardek Brewmand, Coda the Tyler, Ross from 2 Minute Tabletop, Zanil Ambakar, Atomic Code, Walden Yan, Me the Pig, Chris Naismith, Alan Lance, Josiah Hillman, Wonuff, Dieter Reinert, Harry Chung, John Needham, Christoph Herpo, Adam Farkas, Hagen Vingard, Matthew Connaughton, Andrew Witt, Marek Mikolajczyk, Sean McCrory, John Langer, Caffeine Coda, Timothy Gibbons, Alexander Chavez, and Neil Blakey Milner. So a massive thank you to you guys, and of course to everyone else supporting me over on Patreon. For this week though, that is it, so thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all again next time.